much better than I. They gouge the consumers by raising credit card rates, and I heard that from you, and I found it very convincing. That's why I think you would be the right commissioner for
Too bad Tim Geithner wasn't here to listen to this. Actually, maybe that's a good thing. He's not here. It is now 4 o'clock. It is time for questions. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do this. Are we're going to do the handing the person the microphone thing? Yes, we are. So we have so basically, I will pick somebody. Go ahead. Oh, I guess I'm not going to get to choose who gets that question. All right, she's going to choose. You got to wave at her. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Quick question: the Bush or the Republican Party officially announced this week that it was permanently committed to a very, very steep cut in the federal deficit, and at the same time simultaneously committed to an indefinite extension of the Bush administration's tax cuts on the rich, which were due to expire this year. Would somebody please explain that to me?
You're the intended audience for this, not me.
No, let me get the. You know, I have hearing problems, so you have to. I'm sorry. Just the Bush tax cut.
How do you square the Republican desire to reduce the deficit with their stated belief that the Bush tax cuts should be extended indefinitely?
I think you have to ask a Republican.
That's very funny.
Stand up.
You can sit down.
Can the panel discuss the role and the solution for the credit agency ratings, their failure, and where do we go from here? What should be done when these credit rating agencies gave AAA ratings to obviously defective securities?
Can I answer that?
Absolutely.
Sure, please. I think the answer is unbelievably simple. You eliminate their government status. They have a special status that allows, that gives their ratings power, regulatory power, so that under certain circumstances, pension funds can buy AA, AAA rated securities. Ratings, they are written into ratings triggers can cause collateral calls, as we saw with AIG and so on. My answer is, when you buy a stock, you may or may not listen to the analyst who says buy or sell. But it has no force of law, and it has no regulatory means. You either do your homework or you don't. And if you lose money on the stock, you don't blame the analyst. You blame yourself for not having done your homework. I don't understand why the bond market shouldn't work the same way. A rating is just an analyst saying, I think this is worth X. Or I think this, in this case, it's risk. I think this is risk, has less risk than this. I don't understand, and there's nothing wrong with having ratings that you can pay attention to or not pay attention to, but they don't have the force of regulatory power. One of the things that happened in this crisis is that as interest rates went down and as investors, sophisticated investors, were reaching for higher yield, they used the ratings as the basis upon which they bought securities that they didn't otherwise understand. And if you say to the investor, the bond investor, you got to do your homework just like everybody else on the equity side, I think you would eliminate the rating agency problem tomorrow. And you know, we wouldn't have to worry about complicated rules about conflict of interest and who pays them and how they get paid and all that kind of stuff. Just say they have no regulatory power, they have no force of law. You can believe them or not believe them, we don't care.
How about fiduciary responsibility, though?
Whose fiduciary responsibility? The credit rating?
The pension funds.
Well,
I mean, okay, so you leave it to them whether they own the bonds or not. But if the rating agencies downgrade them, they don't want to be found dead with them, right? So they bump.
You know, it's the same thing as mutual. It's the same thing with a money market fund. People buy money market funds because they think they're riskless. They're not riskless. You can lose money in a money market fund, but all the money market funds were loading up on AAA securities. That's if the penalty for a money market fund losing money is to get wiped out because investors take their money out, they will act safely, I think.
I want to talk about one other thing, though, another way one could answer this question, because there's another idea that I'm working on. I don't have enough to do. So, but it has to do with the notion. I know another way to do, another thought about how to deal with credit rating agencies, and that is put them out of business. Because, but think about this. But think how you put them out of business. The whole point is that they became much more powerful when they have this monopoly, effectively monopoly position, partly because it was granted by government that said when certain credit rating agencies do things, trusts can buy them and so on. But also because the things they were rating became so complex that nobody understood them. And the notion that, you know, that the California Pension Fund was going to do the analysis of what these tranches of crazy things were going to be, it was just not going to happen. And so let me offer another way to think about this. The world is changing technologically, and so it is becoming physically possible to tag data, to tag loans, for example, loan level data. And if you tag, for example, every mortgage, just to keep this on a simple example, so that you have, let's just say, 10 basic pieces of information, including who the originator was and some information about who the borrower is and how much the down payment was and so on, that tag stays on it. And it stays on it when it gets put together with something else, when it gets sliced and diced and put into something else and moved into another tranche and moved into another tranche. Now, the relevance of that is anybody who knows how to do a computer program, if those data are available, if they're publicly available data, you sit there and do your own program, and the programmer can tell you what the loss ratios look like on this thing and how to value it. And once you create the virtuous circle of information, that is, that particular broker's stuff goes bust in a minute and a half, and that particular broker's stuff rides out and goes good, or, right, 10% down payment actually works, 0% down payment doesn't work in terms of how that stuff prices out. What we get back to is we get back to the virtuous circle we had in lending and financing originally in, just again picking on the mortgage market. Remember, little banks would say, I'm going to lend to you, I'm going to lend to you, and whatever they got right or whatever they got wrong came back to their balance sheet. So they learned over time, and those who didn't learn over time went out of business. Those who did learn over time got bigger, got better at it. The problem was they were stuck with local markets. So, you know, the smart guy at the First National Bank in Enid, Oklahoma could make a lot of good decisions, but if the plant went out, a bunch of his mortgages went bust. So the whole notion that we had up through the 80s, that we'd have smart people, virtuous lending circles, that went out when we said what we're going to do is we're going to create this national market. That's what securitization did for us. But it broke this virtuous circle of information. I think credit rating agencies are something that we will look back in 20 years when we have fully exploited what we can do with new information technologies and just say, what a crazy thing that we ever relied on them. People who are smart, who program it, and who know how to analyze it are going to be the ones who are going to make money. We're going to have virtuous lending circles here. So just a thought.
The other thing I would add is basically, you know, you could have used the Bloomberg terminal even in this crisis and seen how these tranches of CDS were going balooey, the defaults were rising, and